Kimi ua ngau mo tēnei uri tamariki e kore tae au te whakahaere kauhau mō. Nau mai e piki tō piki tanga kai kā rewa rewa kā wai hua tia ki pū warariki ki te maunga e tū mai i ana ko pare unga onga. Kau i te awa ko whenua kura tō ngā ki ngā kai ko au tutuku atu te kokotaki reira. Te maru ka tata mai ka e ara e tamanai e kura taka i punga e parau punga ai wakawiri ko te tōu o tō tupuna o tū a. E o mana i te uniki rangi pō ka tū te pātuna ki te taitua Whanganui wā ia i o ana i te rangi pū anu au. Wau tēnei, me i atu ana ki te tini ki te mano ko Mohi Apou, whakaaro nui atu ki te kaupapa Poipoia te Manawa Māui, kia i te pēr taku iti ki whai taime ki taku hoa. Hoi anō koia tērā te taha ia auri whakahua tia kia tia atu rā e te kai pāpao, ko Ngā Rauru, ko Whanganui, Taranaki Nui Tonu, me konei oki o te Ati Awa, kia ora rā tātou. Kia ora, bro.
Ka tira tēnā te āpiti taku iti ki te nui o te kōrero kua horohia. Tēnā ka aroa tu rā i au ki tauku te pūaa. O Whanganui tēnei e tūana ki runga anō i a te kahu ātia taku titiro ki te awa eke mai naina, ara ko te awa tupua. Ko tēnei he pūhā ririki i tupu ana ki te taha o te awa nui ārua, o te awa Whanganui, e mihi ana, e tūtoko ana, tēnei ka mihi atu tēnā katoa mai.
Kia ora rā tātou e pakarongo mai ana. So, been watching all the other guest speakers, those ones I managed to watch, and it's been very inspiring, and letting them lead out the day, and as this is a tuatahitanga mo te katoa. So I think most of them, especially for Lee, he set a good platform about how to think around things when we talk about Mātauranga Māori and all those sort of concepts. So you can see on the first screen there, kia toitua Mātauranga Māori. You'll notice it's not a direct translation because it's really about the intent. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. We've got a short time here, but we have a whakaaro nā tō mātou matua. Tau parai, he said, hoatu te kiko, hoatu te kakara ko pirangi te kiko, realizing that there is another opportunity for us to be able to present later on in the year. It's about, we'll give them the sizzle so that they want to come back for the steak. And so that's how we're going to be approaching this particular kōrero kia koutou. He kōrero ai, bro.
So the overall or overarching thing that we want to be leaving as a taster is how upholding the integrity of Mātauranga Māori and non-Māori spaces. And Mohi and myself and others that are working in non-Māori spaces are testing, are having conversations, evolving conversations on what makes it authentic, still has its integrity and is connected to place and space. And so part of the discussion that we want to be talking about today is around when we are in non-Māori spaces. First and foremost, what does that look like? The second part is Mātauranga Māori, and I hear that today that there's been a lot of reference to that. What are we meaning by Mātauranga Māori? Who's Mātauranga? And then we're going to be looking at the saying that Mohi had shared with you, tōpiki amakura no, tokupiki amakura noku, which is the next slide. Thank you very much. And we're going to dive deep into that so that when we bring ourselves to these non-Māori spaces, how do we bring ourselves in a connected way to place and space, which becomes an important binding agent to the success of Te Ao Māori and Mātauranga Māori being delivered authentically. And so part of that discussion that we want to be having today with you as a taster, we're not going to ruku hohonu or kia horohia te matatoru o te kōrero. What we're going to look at is absolutely the questions that we would like to investigate, he uru paunamu, for us to leave with you so that at the end of the year, we can start to have a bit of that steak that Mohi was talking about.
So just on the slides, the second slide, yes, it's a bit of a pepeha, I suppose, about the spaces that we're working in. And the name of this was title was Kia Uru Order. So the Kia Uru Order is the concept or a karakia that was used from our people. And I'm talking about up in the northern part of Taranaki down to Whanganui. And a karakia that was used when going into a new area or a new land or a new understanding or a new journey, so to speak. It's not too different from Māori working in the spaces that we're in right now, down here in Wellington and in the various agencies that they're in. So hence the naming of the word Kia Uru Order, because we're going in to contribute into a space that's it's not ours, but at the same time, how do we make that a part of ours in the way that we uphold our own mana, because it's all about our mana. And so that's why I titled that Kia Uru Order. And Tamahau might want to talk about his title, but the title it gave for us was Tākai Arunui, is that how do we think about tomorrow, and I'm meaning tomorrow, and its impact into now 2022. So the Tākai is about wrapping up the future and what we know from the information we have in the context of working here in Wellington and bringing it and making it relevant in the spaces that we are working in as Māori. Koe rā tāku pēr, mō te tātai heke pēr, bro.
So the tātai heke, the idea was the CE at our organisation was a tahuhu rangapu, so to make sure that we were aligned with the CE and the tahuhu rangapu, the DCEs, we had a wānanga. We made sure that we had people that we could reflect these kind of discussions with and have a deeper dive. So we came up with tātai heke, ngā heke o te ware. Because the DCE is pivotal in making sure that communication goes from the tāuhu ki ngā pou. And so staying with different narratives as we do storytelling, making sure that we're connecting ourselves to the values and narrative of our own organisation. So Tātai Heke Māori is the Deputy Chief Executive Māori at the organisation that I'm working with currently.
Ngā mihi tēnā koe. Kia ora tātou ka huri. So Tamahau made a reference to this whakatauki, which is from home. Tō piki amakura no, tuku piki amakura noku. Now you notice that both Tamahau and I are from Whanganui. So the context and what we're sharing here with everybody who's online is about the knowledge base that we have, which is piki amakura, which is another word for those who are shouldering those responsibilities of their wā kāinga, regardless of where you're from, whether you're Tūhoi, Ngāti Porou, or Te Arawa. That knowledge base that you come into Wellington with, e piki amakura. In the olden days was more attributed to a tohunga, for those ones who are holding all the wealth of knowledge, esoterical knowledge in regards to their own iwi group. And so the whakatauki reference here is with Tamahau and I sharing this. It's not to be understood that what we're sharing with you is the same with every other iwi group, but it is our worldview. It is the wānanga that we have been very lucky to be learned from. So in the context that it says there, you have your house of learning, of course, and with our people when they were taken through these esoterical knowledge, they were taken into a wharenui or a whare, and each iwi group have got a name for those types of whare, for the dissemination of cultural knowledge, whether it be whakapapa, karakia, and of the like. E kōrero pēr kei a koe Tamahau.
Just to add in with Mohi's discussion, this phrase here, this tōpiki amakura, also relates to how we bring ourselves to those non-Māori spaces, but how we organise ourselves as te ao Māori to be connected. And that in my experience being down in different non-Māori spaces, is the conversations that we need to be having so that we make sure that we hold our own piki amakura, and that we acknowledge each iwi piki amakura that are in those forums that we're in, like today. But we also give the due respect to the place and space where you're at. And so those are the things that we're investigating, grappling with, having conversations with, to make it authentic, so that we don't bring our kōrero, our warewananga, to overshadow the mana of people at place, the mana wenua, the haukainga, te aikaroa. So that if you take it out of, you take it within this context, that if we shifted from Wellington to Auckland to Christchurch, that somehow we would have a framework, an understanding that we always make sure that we are relating to place, but bringing ourselves to connect how our old people did. A koe.
Huri noa tēnā koe. So as we, the slide here, toi te ahurea ki a nai nei rangi. So it's exactly that. It's about what is the cultural excellence that every super Māori that I've been hearing that being used quite a lot in this forum, and also within the LinkedIn and all the conversations that have been going through. Being a super Māori, what does that mean? So toi te ahurea is saying, having the cultural excellence and being able to give evidence to that in a non-Māori space. So what am I saying there? It's that no matter where you go, your whare wānanga goes with you. How you express that whare wānanga and your understanding in the spaces that are very foreign to you is kei a koe, or it's how you wish to do that. So what we're saying here is that no matter where you go, you might have heard that saying, you can take I'll use my hatapauran kōrero here because I hear hatapauran being used quite a bit. And I must say, both of us are hatapauran. When you can take the boy out of hatapauran, but you can't take the hatapauran out of the boy. So, toi te ahurea ki a nai nei rangi, how do you take that understanding of your worldview and your understanding, your cultural excellence as a Māori, whatever iwi group, whatever hapu, into a non-Māori space and give full self-expression to that? Kōrero a.
That re-emphasises my points around the piki amakura, that we have things to share, things to contribute, and to make sure that we have an understanding that connects for the betterment of Te Ao Māori wide, and supported by those at place. It's not an easy thing to do, and we know in Wellington it's very hard in Porneke. However, that open conversation and ongoing conversations on how we do that authentically should always be at the forefront when we're talking about Te Ao Māori, Mātauranga Māori, Tikanga Māori, Kawa, Tikanga, all these words that are out there in the public domain that get used in different non-Māori spaces, that there has to be a discussion with us going forward around making sure that these things still stay in there authentic. We're not giving away the depths from the te kore right through, that we are making sure that we hold to our own house of learning, but we also are respecting what's at place, the kawa, the tikanga at place. Not an easy thing to navigate, but it is a thing that should be at the forefront of our conversations when we are designing narratives, when we are trying to implement tiriti strategies, when we are trying to drive capability building, that when we are trying to make sure that we're challenging the system to respond better to Māori and to iwi and to whānau and Māori groups.
Kia ora. Thank you. Kia huri noa. So, you'll notice the name here, he mate aone. It's a kupu anō no te kāinga, and I know it's been used in other areas for us. It means, what are those things that you hold dear to your heart? I mean, deep feelings that you are committed to giving full self-expression to those things that you believe in. So hence the word mahe mate aone. And we've come up with these words. Sorry, I won't say words. These cultural values. As you can see there, Te Rau Māori. The question is, what is that in your space? Remember in the whakatauki at the back, tō piki amakura no, tōku piki amakura noku. And then what do those mean? What do those value sets mean in your understanding as your people have fed that to you? And what is the application that you've used you've used those within the spaces that you're in? Te ao Māori, then we have kawa, and then we have tikanga, kaupapa, and Mātauranga Māori. So the point here we're saying is we've heard a lot of these words being used here in Wellington, not necessarily together, maybe one or two together, maybe three together, but not necessarily all of them in one type of understanding. So for ourselves, when we're practicing these words, or I'll call them cultural call them po, what are they, what context are we using them in, and what relationship do they have with the other po in that understanding? So as we've got here as an example. There are many other words, and if everybody's got questions around that, we're very happy to answer those, but ka hua te pē te wahanga kia koe Tamahau.
He mate ao ne, these po, these pillars are commonly heard within non-Māori spaces, but yet not explained differently depending on where you go. What we're having conversations, having our wānanga amongst a group of us is, how do we come up with the order of things? How do we find order? And because we as Māori love to have order. And in that, how do you frame it up so that we are able to have an understanding that it's able to be contextualized to the narrative which each organisation uses. It's not saying that this is going to mean that everybody uses a river for their narrative and strategies and everything. What it is saying is that we have an understanding that these po are the foundations by which we begin to look at things from a te ao Māori view. It doesn't say or mean that those who wish to focus on one of them or have another discussion want to do that in their own organisations or already have that in organisations. What we're trying to make sure that there's some authentic view as to these 5 pillars, and that these 5 pillars are able to be contextualised to different organisations, especially the organisations that we're working in and with, and that they're easily or they're palatable for those non-Māori spaces. What am I trying to say is that I'm not trying to turn non-Māori spaces into being the people in there to be Māori. What we are saying is that they need to take responsibility as tangata tiriti to connect and understand te ao Māori. And so for us, it's around making sure that we can make it palatable, clear, understandable, and what's already out in the public domain. And these words here are all out in the public domain, but we can put an order to it. And the questions we're asking ourselves and the questions we're asking you is, what is your thoughts on putting an order to these 5 pillars that can make it understandable that when we're talking from organisation to organisation, from one non-Māori space to another non-Māori space, that we have some clarity on, if you're saying that you're going to be tiriti-led or te ao Māori-led, then there has to be 1 or 2 or 3 of these pillars in your development, in your policies, in your application, in your procedures, in your discussions, in the way that your hierarchy, your reporting structures, your delegations of authority happen within your organisation. And so these are the conversations we're having. How do we make sure that these things become still, back to the overarching uru pounamu, is around, well, let's define them. But also let's make sure that it's connectable back to my house of learning, tōku piki amakura. that is connectable to place, so in Wellington, to Te Ati Awa, te piki amakura o Te Ati Awa, te piki amakura o Ngāti Tūwharetoa. It's a shiftable framework that when we are in national offices, that piki amakura is acknowledging Ngāti Whātua, Tainui, and so forth, when we're in Auckland, and so forth. Because sometimes we come with our piki amakura, and it may overshadow the mana or the piki amakura at place. Kia ora.
Kia ora. I think kei te ki mai kua pau te wā ki a tātou ngā te tere hoki rā o te taima. I think we may, because our time has come up, so we possibly could leave some of these next, but there's only 2 slides left around this, and if Kara wants to shift us over to the next part of this day. Ka waihope tēnei wahanga ia hau, ia maua, and ka tuku nā atu mā te hinengaro anō, ai rangahau te kupu rāua ko te kōrero i puta i tā māua nei whakatau ki a koutou. E mihi atu ana ki a koutou te whakarongo mai nei.